The waitress, who was looked down upon, was the only one to console the millionaire's autistic son. Jasmine Washington wiped the tears from her face as she walked to the Golden Palace restaurant in the most upscale neighborhood of New York City. Once again, she had woken up wondering if it was worth facing another day of humiliations just to pay the rent for the small apartment she shared with her sister. But it was when she saw that blonde boy thrashing on the floor of the main dining room that everything changed. The 8-year-old boy was screaming in a way that made all the customers stop eating, while a man in an expensive suit tried unsuccessfully to control him. "Ethan, please, calm down," said the man, clearly desperate. "Everyone is watching." Jasmine watched the scene for a few seconds. The boy was flapping his hands repetitively, and his screams didn't seem like a common tantrum. She recognized those movements, that desperation in the child's eyes. It was the same as what she had seen in her nephew Tyler a few years ago. Without a second thought, Jasmine approached the table, ignoring the disapproving look from the manager, Richard. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly to the man in the suit. "May I try to help?" Jonathan Reynolds, owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, looked at her with a mix of desperation and distrust. A black waitress in a yellow and red uniform wanted to help his son when even the best doctors couldn't? "That won't be necessary," he replied, trying to pick the boy up. "It's just a passing episode." But Ethan continued to struggle more intensely, and some customers were already starting to get up from their tables, annoyed. Jasmine knelt on the floor at the boy's level and began to hum softly a melody she had learned from her nephew's therapist. "Be still, Ethan," she whispered, keeping her voice calm and steady. "It's okay. No one is going to hurt you." To the surprise of everyone in the restaurant, the boy began to quiet his screams. Jasmine continued humming, making slow movements with her hands, creating a visual rhythm that the boy could follow. "How do you know his name?" asked Jonathan, visibly shocked. "You repeated it several times," replied Jasmine, still focused on the boy. "Ethan, just look at my hands. Shall we breathe together?" In less than 5 minutes, Ethan was sitting on the floor, breathing more calmly and staring intently at Jasmine. For the first time in months, Jonathan saw his son truly relaxed in public. "My God," murmured Jonathan. "How did you do that?" Jasmine smiled timidly, helping Ethan to his feet. "I have a nephew who also needs a little extra patience sometimes. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing." The other restaurant employees watched the scene in astonishment. Richard, the manager, approached with his face red with anger. "Jasmine, return to your station immediately," he said through his teeth. "You weren't hired to take care of children." But Jonathan raised his hand, stopping her from leaving. "Wait a moment," he said, looking at Ethan, who had taken Jasmine's hand and didn't want to let go. "What did you mean about your nephew?" Jasmine hesitated. She knew she shouldn't get involved with the customers, especially the wealthiest ones, but something in that father's desperate look touched her. "Well, my nephew has autism, sir. I learned a few things to help him when he gets like this." The word autism hit Jonathan like a punch to the stomach. For 2 years he had been trying to understand what was different about Ethan, taking him to the best specialists in New York City, but no official diagnosis had been given. The doctors always talked about developmental delays or childhood anxiety. You think my son has—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm not a doctor, sir," said Jasmine quickly. "I just recognized some signs. Ethan doesn't handle noise and lots of movement well. That's why he got nervous." Ethan pulled Jasmine's hand again and pointed to the chair. "Does he want you to sit?" asked Jonathan, incredulous. Ethan rarely interacted this way with strangers. In fact, he rarely interacted this way with anyone, including his own father. Jasmine looked at Richard, who was making nervous gestures for her to return to work. "I need to work, Ethan," she said softly. "But how about if your daddy asks for a quieter table over there in the corner? That way you'll be more comfortable." To Jonathan's astonishment, Ethan nodded. It was the first time the boy had shown any opinion about where he wanted to sit in a restaurant. "All right," said Jonathan, still processing what he had just witnessed. "Can we change tables?" Richard had no choice but to agree, but his eyes shot daggers in Jasmine's direction. During the rest of the lunch, whenever Jasmine passed near the table, Ethan smiled and tried to get her attention. Jonathan watched everything with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. How had a simple waitress managed in minutes what he had been trying to do for years? When it was time to leave, Ethan refused to get out of the chair. "Come on, son, we have to go," said Jonathan, trying to take the boy's hand. But Ethan started getting agitated again, pointing at Jasmine, who was cleaning a nearby table. "Miss," called Jonathan. "Sorry to bother you, but—" Jasmine approached immediately. "It's okay, Ethan," she said, kneeling down again. "Your daddy needs to take you home, but look here." She took a small stuffed toy from her apron pocket. It was a little yellow dog she always carried to remember her nephew. "This is Buddy. He likes car rides. How about if he goes with you today?" Ethan took the toy and, to Jonathan's absolute surprise, looked directly into Jasmine's eyes and said, "Thank you." Jonathan felt his eyes fill with tears. It was the first time in months that Ethan had spontaneously said thank you to anyone. "I," began Jonathan, clearly emotional. "How much do I owe you for the toy?" "Nothing, sir," said Jasmine, smiling. "It was a pleasure to meet Ethan." That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He stayed up researching online about childhood autism, and every symptom he read seemed to perfectly describe Ethan's behavior. How had he been so blind? How had he not noticed before? The next day, he returned to the Golden Palace with Ethan for lunch. The boy pulled his father's hand straight to the corner table where they had sat the day before. "Do you want the Lady Jasmine to wait on us again?" asked Jonathan. Ethan nodded vigorously, pressing the little yellow dog against his chest. When Jasmine approached the table, Ethan stretched his arms toward her like he did when he wanted a hug. Jasmine looked at Jonathan, asking for permission. "You can hug him," he said, seeing the genuine smile on his son's face. "He only does this with people he trusts a lot." During the hug, Jonathan noticed how Ethan completely relaxed. It was as if all the tension the boy carried simply disappeared in that woman's presence. "Can I ask a personal question?" said Jonathan when Jasmine stepped back to take their order. "Of course, sir." "Your nephew. How did you find out he had autism?" Jasmine sighed, remembering the difficult times her family went through. "It was complicated. My sister Tiffany noticed that Tyler didn't respond when they called his name, and that he made strange movements with his hands. We took him to the health clinic, but they said it was normal, that every child develops at their own pace. And after that? Tiffany didn't give up. She works as a housekeeper and saved money for months to take Tyler to a private doctor. That's when we found out. Tyler was 3 years old at the time. And now? How is he doing?" Jasmine smiled affectionately. "Much better. He goes to therapy twice a week and I help at home with the activities. It wasn't easy at first, but we learned that Tyler just needs a different way of doing things." Jonathan listened to every word with full attention. Finally, someone who understood what he was going through, even coming from a completely different reality. "Do you think I should look for a specialist doctor?" "It's not for me to say, sir. But if you'd like, I can give you the name of the doctor who takes care of Tyler. She's very good and has the patience to explain everything." That afternoon, Jonathan called Dr. Emily Baker's clinic and made an appointment for Ethan. For the first time in years, he felt he was on the right track. During the following 2 weeks, Jonathan and Ethan had lunch at the Golden Palace every day. Ethan always asked to sit at the corner table and always waited eagerly for Jasmine's arrival. Richard, the manager, began to get irritated with the situation. "Jasmine, you're spending too much time with that table," he said privately. "We have other customers to attend to." "I'm sorry, Richard. I only help when the child gets nervous. It's not our problem if the boy has some disorder. You were hired to serve food, not to be a babysitter." Richard's words hurt Jasmine, but she knew she needed the job. She tried to keep more distance, but whenever Ethan started to get agitated, she couldn't ignore him. At the appointment with Dr. Emily, Jonathan finally received the official diagnosis. Ethan had autism spectrum disorder level of support 1. The doctor explained that with proper therapy, Ethan could have a normal life and develop his social skills very well. "Is there anything specific that has been helping him lately?" asked the doctor. Jonathan told her about Jasmine and how Ethan reacted positively in her presence. "That's very important," said the doctor. "Autistic people often connect deeply with individuals who show genuine understanding. If that person has experience with autism, they can be a valuable source of support." That night, Jonathan made a decision. The next day, he went to the Golden Palace early, before lunchtime. "I'd like to speak with Jasmine Washington," he said to Richard. "She's in the kitchen setting up the tables. May I ask what this is about?" "It's personal. Could you please call her?" Richard rolled his eyes but went to get Jasmine. When she appeared, she was visibly nervous. "Did something happen to Ethan, sir?" No. Actually, I wanted to thank you. I took Ethan to the doctor and we received a diagnosis. He has autism, as you suspected." Jasmine smiled with relief. "And how did Ethan take the news?" "I haven't talked to him about it yet. The doctor said to wait a bit. But I wanted to make you a proposal." Jasmine looked at Richard, who was clearly listening to the conversation while pretending to organize papers. "What kind of proposal?" "I'd like to hire you to take care of Ethan a few hours a week. You could teach him the techniques you use with your nephew, help him socialize better. I would pay very well." The proposal took Jasmine completely by surprise. It was an incredible opportunity, but it also meant leaving her job at the restaurant, her only guaranteed source of income. "I don't know what to say, sir. Think it over. You don't have to decide now. May I ask something?" "Why me? You could hire any specialized professional." Jonathan thought for a moment before answering. "Because Ethan trusts you. And honestly, you were the first person who made me feel I wasn't alone in this." Richard approached with an unfriendly expression. "Jasmine, your 15-minute break is over. Get back to work." "Of course," she said, but before walking away she looked at Jonathan. "Sir, may I give you an answer tomorrow?" "Of course, and you can call me Jonathan." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That evening, Jasmine had a long conversation with her sister Tiffany about Jonathan's proposal. "Jas, this is the chance of a lifetime," said Tiffany, while preparing dinner in the small apartment they shared in the South Jamaica neighborhood. "You've always dreamed of working with special needs children. But what if it doesn't work out? What if I can't help Ethan the way he expects?" "You helped Tyler, didn't you? And he wasn't even your son." Tyler, now 7 years old, was playing quietly on the living room floor with his colorful blocks. When he heard his name, he looked up and smiled at Jasmine. "Aren't Jas good?" he said, returning to his play. "See?" said Tiffany. "Tyler loves you, and that child from the restaurant does too. But Tiffany, working for a wealthy family, will they respect me? You saw how the restaurant manager treats me. Jas, you have a gift. You can't waste it because of people like Richard." The next morning, Jasmine arrived at the Golden Palace determined to accept Jonathan's proposal. But when she entered the restaurant, she found a tense atmosphere. Richard was talking seriously with 3 other waiters. "Ah, you're here," said Richard when he saw her. "Come here." Jasmine approached with a racing heart. "Did you hear that Mr. Reynolds made a formal complaint about the service yesterday?" "What do you mean?" "He said you crossed the line by getting involved with his family's personal problems, that it's not professional for an employee to interfere with customers' health matters." Jasmine was completely shocked. Jonathan had complained about her. After everything that happened. "But Richard, I only helped when the child got upset." "Doesn't matter. The restaurant management has decided to transfer you to the morning shift in the kitchen. You'll be working in dishwashing starting today." Jasmine's heart sank. Working in the kitchen meant earning less and having no contact with customers. It was practically a punishment. "May I know exactly what Mr. Reynolds said?" "He said you were taking advantage of his child's situation to try to get benefits, that you offered your services inappropriately." Tears began to form in Jasmine's eyes. How could Jonathan have twisted everything like that? She genuinely cared about Ethan and never had ulterior motives. "All right, Richard, I'll go to the kitchen." Throughout the morning, Jasmine washed dishes and tried to understand what had happened. At 11 o'clock, she heard Ethan's familiar voice in the main dining room. "Where's Miss Jasmine?" asked the boy, clearly agitated. "Son, the young lady won't be able to help us today," she heard Jonathan's voice. "I want Miss Jasmine." Ethan began to raise his voice. Jasmine wiped her hands on her apron and peeked through the kitchen door. Ethan was beginning to have a meltdown, rapidly flapping his hands and making repetitive sounds. Her instinct was to run and help, but Richard blocked her path. "You're not going out there," he said firmly. "Not your problem anymore." "But Richard, the boy is suffering." "His father's problem. Should have thought about that before complaining about you." Jasmine watched helplessly as Jonathan tried unsuccessfully to calm Ethan. Other customers began to show discomfort, and some restaurant employees exchanged disapproving looks. After 15 minutes of failed attempts, Jonathan gave up and left the restaurant carrying Ethan, who was crying profusely. Jasmine returned to the kitchen with a broken heart. She couldn't understand how Jonathan could have done that to her, especially after seeing his own son's suffering. At the end of her shift, she was leaving the restaurant when she found Jonathan waiting on the sidewalk. "Jasmine, I need to talk to you." She walked right past him without stopping. "Jasmine, wait," he called, running after her. "Why didn't you come take care of Ethan today?" She stopped and turned to him, with tears in her eyes. "Because you complained about me to management. They said you thought it was inappropriate for me to get involved with your family's personal problems." Jonathan was completely confused. "I never did that. Who told you that?" "Manager Richard. He said you filed a formal complaint yesterday." "That's a lie. I never spoke to anyone in management. On the contrary, I came here today specifically to find out if you had decided about my proposal." Jasmine studied Jonathan's face, looking for signs of deception, but he seemed genuinely shocked and outraged. "Then why was I transferred to the kitchen?" "I have no idea, but I'll find out right now." Jonathan went back into the Golden Palace and asked to speak with Richard immediately. "Manager, I'd like to understand why employee Jasmine Washington was transferred to another department." Richard smiled falsely. "Ah, Mr. Reynolds, as you yourself said yesterday, she was being inappropriate by meddling in personal matters." "I never said that. I never spoke to you about Jasmine, except to praise her work." Richard's smile quickly disappeared. "There must have been a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding. You lied to her and punished her for something that never happened. I want her back in her department immediately." "Mr. Reynolds, with all due respect, internal team matters are my responsibility, and matters of where I spend my money are my responsibility," interrupted Jonathan firmly. "I've had lunch here every day for the past 2 weeks. If Jasmine doesn't return to wait on my table, I'll find another place." Richard hesitated. Jonathan Reynolds was one of the restaurant's most important clients, known for always leaving generous tips and bringing influential people to lunch there. "Very well, sir. Tomorrow she returns to the main dining room." "Great. And I want a public explanation for her about the misunderstanding." When Jonathan left the restaurant, Jasmine was still waiting on the sidewalk. "It's settled," he said. "Tomorrow you return to your normal post." The manager admitted there was a misunderstanding. Jasmine felt immense relief, but also deep gratitude that Jonathan had taken the trouble to defend her. "Thank you, sir. I mean, Jonathan." "No need to thank me. And about my proposal, have you thought about it?" Jasmine took a deep breath. "I accept, but with one condition." "What?" "I want to continue working at the restaurant part-time. I need the security of a steady job, at least at the beginning." Jonathan smiled. "Perfect. We can arrange for you to take care of Ethan in the mornings before restaurant hours. And what about payment? How about $2,000 a week?" Jasmine almost lost her balance. It was more than she earned in an entire month at the restaurant. $2,000 a month, you mean?" "No, per week. Ethan is worth much more than money to me." That night, Jasmine could hardly sleep from excitement. She would finally have the chance to use her experience with autism professionally, and she would even earn enough to get her family out of their tight financial situation. The following Monday, at 8 in the morning, Jasmine rang the doorbell of Jonathan's mansion in the Scarsdale neighborhood. She had never been in such a large and luxurious house. A woman in a white uniform opened the door. "You must be Jasmine. I'm Dorothy. I've worked here for 15 years. Mr. Jonathan is waiting for you in the living room. Jasmine was led through hallways decorated with extremely expensive works of art until they reached a spacious room with huge windows overlooking a well-kept garden. Jonathan was playing on the floor with Ethan, trying to put together a puzzle. When Ethan saw Jasmine, his eyes lit up and he ran to hug her. "Miss Jasmine," he said, squeezing the hug tightly. "Hi, Ethan. How are you?" "Buddy stayed home," he said, showing the little yellow dog he still carried everywhere. "I'm glad you took good care of him." Jonathan watched the interaction with a smile on his face. "He asked about you all weekend. Last night he said today would be a special day because you would come to play." "Is that true, Ethan?" asked Jasmine, kneeling down to his level. Ethan nodded vigorously. During the next 2 hours, Jasmine worked with Ethan on motor coordination, communication, and socialization activities. She used techniques she learned from Tyler's therapist, adapting them to Ethan's specific needs. "It's amazing," commented Jonathan, watching. "He never stays focused on one activity for so long." "It's because the activities make sense to him," explained Jasmine. "Autistic children need to understand the purpose of what they're doing." By late morning, Ethan was noticeably calmer and had managed to communicate several desires clearly. "See you tomorrow, Ethan," said Jasmine, picking up her bag. "Jasmine come back tomorrow?" asked Ethan, a bit anxious. "Yes, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll play again." Ethan smiled and gave her another hug. On the way to the restaurant, Jasmine felt fulfilled like never before. She was finally making a difference in the life of a child who really needed it. During the following weeks, the routine settled in perfectly. In the morning, Jasmine worked with Ethan at the mansion. In the afternoon, she waited tables at the Golden Palace. Ethan was visibly progressing, communicating better, and having fewer anxiety episodes. Jonathan began to participate more actively in the sessions, learning the techniques Jasmine used. "I never imagined it could be so simple," he said one day, after managing to calm Ethan during a small crisis. "The doctors always talked about complicated treatments." "It's not simple," corrected Jasmine. "It's consistent. The difference is that you're learning Ethan's language." "How so?" "Every autistic child has their own way of communicating. Ethan speaks through his body, sounds, repetitions. When we understand that, it becomes easier to help him." Jonathan admired Jasmine's patience and knowledge more and more. He started researching autism on his own and discovered she was applying advanced techniques that cost a fortune in specialized clinics. One day he decided to ask about her past. "Jasmine, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "You said you learned these techniques because of your nephew, but it seems you know much more than someone who just attends therapies." Jasmine hesitated for a moment. "Actually, I was a teacher before working at the restaurant." Jonathan was surprised. "A teacher? Of what?" "Special education. I graduated from Columbia University 10 years ago." "And why did you stop?" Jasmine sighed, remembering a painful period of her life. "I worked at a private school in the Upper East Side. I had an autistic student, Mason, 6 years old. His parents were going through a complicated divorce and used the boy as a bargaining chip." "How so?" "The father wanted to put Mason in an institution. He said it was too much work to care for a special needs child. The mother agreed because she wanted to start her life over." Jonathan listened attentively, noticing the pain in Jasmine's voice. "I reported the situation to Child Protective Services. I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting Mason." "And what happened?" "The parents found out I was the one who reported them. They had a lot of money and influence. They sued the school, claiming I was harassing the family. The principal fired me to avoid trouble." "But you were protecting a child." "Yes, but I was just a poor black teacher accusing a wealthy white family. No one stood by my side." Jonathan felt a mix of anger and admiration. Anger at the injustice Jasmine suffered, and admiration for her risking everything to protect a child. "And what about Mason?" "He was placed in an institution 2 months later. I tried to visit him a few times, but they wouldn't let me in. I'm so sorry. After that, I couldn't get a teaching job anymore. Whenever they did a background check, the lawsuit came up. So I started working as a waitress." "But that's ridiculous. You were punished for doing the right thing. That's life, Jonathan. People like me don't have many options when powerful people decide to harm us." That night, Jonathan couldn't get Jasmine's story out of his head. She had lost her career trying to protect an autistic child, and now she was saving his own son. The irony of the situation touched him deeply. The next day, during the session with Ethan, Jonathan made a decision. "Jasmine, I want to make a different proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to work exclusively for me, leave the restaurant and dedicate yourself fully to Ethan. I'll pay 5,000 Rs per week." Jasmine was in shock. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of earning in her life. "Jonathan, that's very generous, but it's not generosity, it's justice. You should be working in the field you love, using your knowledge to help children. What happened to you was an injustice." "But 5,000 a week, that's a lot to care for just one child." "Then let's expand. How about we create a space here at home to serve other children too, a small therapeutic center?" Jasmine felt her heart race. It was as if Jonathan was offering her the chance to fulfill all her professional dreams. "You would do that?" "Of course. Ethan needs to learn to socialize with other children anyway. And you could teach other parents the techniques you taught me." Ethan, who was playing on the floor, looked up when he heard the conversation. "More friends to play with?" he asked, interested. "That's right, son. Jasmine is going to bring other boys and girls to play with you." Ethan clapped his hands, showing enthusiasm. "I accept," said Jasmine with tears in her eyes, "but I have one condition." "What is it?" "I want the first child to join to be my nephew, Tyler." Jonathan smiled. "Of course, he will be very welcome." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. 2 weeks later, Jasmine quit her job at the Golden Palace. Richard tried to change her mind, offering a small promotion, but she was determined. "You're making a mistake, Jasmine," he said. "Working for a wealthy family is dangerous. They'll get tired of you eventually." "Thanks for the advice, Richard, but this time I'm going to take the risk." On her first day working exclusively for Jonathan, Jasmine arrived at the mansion with Tyler. The boy was nervous, holding onto her hand. "It's okay, Tyler. Remember I told you about Ethan? He's going to be your friend." When Ethan saw another boy arriving, he froze and hid behind Jasmine. "Ethan, this is my nephew Tyler. He likes to play with the same toys you do." Jasmine had carefully prepared the first meeting. She placed several sensory toys on the floor and let the two boys explore naturally without forcing interaction. After 20 minutes, Ethan approached Tyler and offered him a colorful cube. Tyler picked up the cube and smiled. It was the beginning of a friendship that would change both of their lives. Jonathan watched everything from a distance, moved to see Ethan interacting spontaneously with another child for the first time. "How did you know they would get along?" he asked Jasmine. "Autistic children usually understand each other. They don't judge, they don't have prejudices. They just want someone who understands their way of playing." During the following months, other parents began seeking out Jasmine. The news that there was an excellent specialist caring for autistic children spread quickly through the medical community. Dr. Emily, the doctor who followed Ethan's case, began referring other patients to Jasmine. "I've never seen a child progress as quickly as Ethan," she told Jonathan during an appointment. "Whatever you're doing at home is working better than many specialized clinics." Jasmine created small therapy groups, always with a maximum of 4 children per session. Jonathan's house was adapted with a specific space for the activities, complete with sensory materials and therapeutic toys. Within 6 months, she was already seeing 15 regular children. Desperate parents came from other states to learn about her work. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some wealthy families struggled to accept that a black woman, a former waitress, could be more competent than renowned doctors. "Are you sure she's qualified?" asked Catherine Miller, the mother of one of the children, to Jonathan. "Wouldn't it be better to look for a professional with more credentials?" "Jasmine has 10 years of experience in special education and proven results," replied Jonathan, annoyed by the prejudiced subtext of the question. "Yes, but you understand my concern. We're talking about our children." "Exactly. And that's precisely why I chose the best professional I know." Some parents withdrew their children from the program, preferring more expensive clinics with white doctors. Jasmine was hurt, but Jonathan encouraged her to continue. "The people who left missed out. The parents who stayed will see incredible results. And he was right. The children who remained in the program showed extraordinary progress. Ethan, in particular, was unrecognizable. "Daddy, can I help Jasmine today?" he asked one morning spontaneously. It was the first time Ethan had offered to help someone. Jonathan could barely contain his emotion. During one of the sessions, something unexpected happened. One of the children, Noah, a 5-year-old, had a severe meltdown and began hurting himself, banging his head against the wall repeatedly. Jasmine tried to calm him using all the techniques she knew, but nothing was working. The child's mother panicked. "Do something!" she shouted. "He's going to seriously hurt himself!" It was then that Ethan approached Noah and began humming the same melody Jasmine had used with him months before. Noah immediately stopped hurting himself and looked at Ethan attentively. "Noah, let's breathe," said Ethan, imitating the gestures he had learned from Jasmine. Within minutes, Noah was calm, holding Ethan's hand. "My God," whispered Noah's mother. "How did he know what to do?" "Ethan learned to help because someone first helped him," explained Jasmine proudly. That moment marked a turning point in the program. Ethan began helping other children naturally, becoming a kind of junior assistant to Jasmine. Jonathan realized that his son was not only doing better, but was developing empathy and leadership skills he hadn't thought possible. One day, while watching Ethan help Tyler with a puzzle, Jonathan approached Jasmine. "You know, I was thinking, about what? Maybe we should expand this, create a larger center, help more families." Jasmine was excited by the idea, but also apprehensive. "That would be amazing, but a large center needs permits, specialized staff, a lot of investment. Leave that to me. You just focus on taking care of the children." Jonathan Reynolds began researching how to open a specialized therapy center. He discovered he needed authorization from several agencies and that the process could take months. But he was determined. Ethan had found his place in the world, and other families deserved to have the same opportunity. During the bureaucratic process, something unexpected happened. Richard, Jasmine Washington's former manager at the Golden Palace, showed up at Jonathan's house. "I need to talk to you about Jasmine," he said to Jonathan. "What about her?" "Did you know she was fired from her previous job for reporting a wealthy family? They sued her for defamation." Jonathan already knew the story, but he pretended to be surprised to see where Richard was going with this. "So what? Don't you think it's dangerous to let a person with that background take care of your son? What if she makes up some lie about you too?" Jonathan immediately understood Richard's intentions. He was trying to sabotage Jasmine out of revenge, since the restaurant lost several customers after she left. "Richard, I appreciate your concern, but I trust Jasmine completely, and I suggest you don't spread rumors about her. They're not rumors. They're facts. I can show you the court documents." "I don't need to see anything. And now please leave my property." Richard left angry, but Jonathan knew he wouldn't give up easily. Resentful people could be very dangerous. His concern proved justified. In the following weeks, some parents participating in the program began receiving anonymous calls with distorted information about Jasmine's past. "Jonathan, 3 families cancelled this week," said Jasmine, visibly worried. "They said they heard things about my past." "What kind of things?" "That I targeted wealthy families, that I made up problems with the children to keep myself needed." Jonathan was furious. It was exactly what Richard had threatened to do. "Jasmine, this will pass. The people who know you know it's a lie." "But what if it doesn't pass? What if no one else wants to leave their children with me?" Ethan, who was playing in the corner, heard the distress in Jasmine's voice and came closer. "Jasmine sad?" he asked, touching her face gently. "No, Ethan, Aunt Jasmine is just worried." "Daddy, tell Jasmine she is good," said Ethan to Jonathan. "I already did, son, but sometimes people take a while to understand." That night, Jonathan made a drastic decision. He hired a private investigator to trace the anonymous calls and find out who was spreading lies about Jasmine. Within a week, the investigator confirmed that Richard was behind the defamation campaign. He had hired a telemarketing company to call the parents using distorted information about the lawsuit Jasmine had faced years ago. Jonathan confronted Richard directly, this time with evidence. Either you stop this campaign against Jasmine, or I will sue you for defamation and harassment. Richard tried to deny it, but faced with the evidence, he ended up admitting it. That woman ruined my restaurant. Several important customers stopped coming after she left. That doesn't justify lying about her and harming the work with special needs children. Work? She's an opportunist who meddles in the lives of wealthy families. Jonathan lost his patience. Richard, you have 24 hours to call all the parents you contacted and tell them the truth. Otherwise, I will take legal action. The threat worked. Richard, fearing a lawsuit he couldn't afford, made the calls, apologizing and admitting he had distorted information about Jasmine. Some families returned to the program, but others had already lost their trust. Jasmine was deeply shaken by the whole situation. Jonathan, maybe it's better if I stop. I don't want you and Ethan to be harmed because of me. Don't even think about that. You saved my son. You changed our lives. I won't let prejudiced people destroy this. Ethan, who was present during the conversation, hugged Jasmine tightly. Don't go away, he said with tears in his eyes. I won't, Ethan. I promise. But the difficulties weren't over. When Jonathan tried to speed up the permits for the specialized center, he discovered someone had made anonymous complaints against him, claiming he was operating illegally. The inspectors arrived at his home without warning and found the adapted space where Jasmine cared for the children. Mr. Reynolds, are you aware you need specific permits for therapeutic activities? Asked the inspector. Yes, we're in the process of obtaining all necessary permits. Meanwhile, we don't charge any families. Even so, you need to suspend activities until you regularize the situation. Jasmine felt responsible for Jonathan's problems. I brought these problems into your life, she said, crying. You should fire me before it gets worse. Jasmine, look at me, said Jonathan, holding her hands. 8 months ago, my son didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't interact with anyone. Today, he helps other children, communicates, shows affection. That's priceless. Ethan approached them, Daddy and Jasmine crying. No, son, just talking about important things. Jasmine important, said Ethan with conviction. Jasmine family. Ethan's simple words deeply touched both Jonathan and Jasmine. An 8-year-old autistic child had summarized in 2 sentences what adults complicated with prejudices and fears. You're right, Ethan, said Jonathan. Jasmine is family. At that moment, Jonathan made a decision that would change everything. If they couldn't create an official center immediately, they would create something even better. A non-profit foundation dedicated specifically to autistic children from underprivileged families. Jasmine, what if we did things differently? How so? Instead of a commercial center, how about a free foundation? We'd serve mainly families who can't afford private treatment. That would be amazing, but a foundation needs a lot of money to maintain. I have enough money. What I need is someone competent to lead the project. Are you serious? Completely. Would you agree to be educational director of the Ethan and Tyler Foundation? Jasmine was moved by the chosen name for the foundation. Why Ethan and Tyler? Because they're the ones who taught me that love and inclusion have no color, social class, or origin. By the end of that year, the Ethan and Tyler Foundation was officially created. Jasmine became educational director, and Jonathan invested $2 million initial REAs to structure the project. The center was built on land Jonathan bought in the East Bronx of New York City, near the community where Jasmine had grown up. The idea was to serve mainly underprivileged families, but also accept some middle-class families to maintain sustainability. Ethan actively participated in the opening, cutting the ribbon alongside Jasmine and giving a short speech he prepared with her help. Here different children will be equal, he said into the microphone, with the clarity he had developed over the months. The foundation started serving 20 children, but demand quickly grew. Within 6 months, there were 50 regular children and a waiting list of over 100. Jasmine hired other professionals, always prioritizing competence over appearances. The team included occupational therapists, speech therapists, psychologists, and special educators from diverse backgrounds. Prejudice works both ways, she explained to Jonathan one day. Some poor families distrust white professionals, thinking they won't understand their reality. Other wealthy families distrust black professionals, thinking they aren't qualified enough. We need diversity to serve everyone well. Ethan became the foundation's child ambassador. Whenever new children arrived, he would offer to show them around and teach them the activities. Tyler also improved tremendously. He started talking more, developed an interest in music, and became very close to Ethan. The two were inseparable. One day, during one of the group activities, something unexpected happened. A new girl, Emma, arrived extremely aggressive and frightened. Her parents had recently separated and she wasn't handling the change well. Emma came in screaming, hitting anyone who came near and throwing herself on the floor. It was exactly the kind of behavior Jasmine had seen many times, but which always required time and patience to resolve. Ethan watched the situation for a few minutes. Then he went to Jasmine and whispered, "Can I try to help Emma?" "Of course, Ethan. But be careful." Ethan slowly approached Emma, who was hiding under a table. Instead of trying to pull her out, he sat on the floor in front of the table and started drawing. "I'm drawing a tree," he said calmly. "There's a little bird on the branch." Emma stopped screaming, curious about the drawing. "Do you want to see?" asked Ethan, pushing the paper closer to the table. Emma reached out and touched the paper. "Do you want to draw too?" Ethan continued. "I can share my pencils." Within 15 minutes, Emma was sitting on the floor next to Ethan, drawing quietly. When her parents arrived to pick her up, they couldn't believe what they saw. "How did you manage to calm her down?" asked her mother, impressed. "At home, she screams all day." "It was Ethan," explained Jasmine. "He understands how other children feel when they're scared." This episode marked a new phase for the foundation. Ethan began to be recognized as an example that autistic children could not only be helped, but could also help others. Dr. Emily, who had been following Ethan's development since his diagnosis, wrote a scientific article about the case, highlighting how the welcoming environment and Jasmine's methodology had allowed an autistic child to develop empathy and leadership skills. The article gained national attention. Jasmine started receiving invitations to give lectures at universities and medical conferences. "I never imagined I would be a speaker," she told Jonathan before her first presentation at Columbia University. "I'm afraid I won't be able to explain it properly." "You will. You understand autism like few others, and your story is inspiring." The lecture was a success. Jasmine spoke about the importance of seeing each autistic child as a unique individual with unique potential, instead of focusing only on the difficulties. "Ethan taught me that autistic children don't need to be fixed," she told the audience of doctors and students. "They need to be understood and respected. When that happens, they surprise us with abilities we never even imagined existed." After the lecture, several professionals approached Jasmine to learn about the Foundation's work. Universities began sending interns, and other states requested consulting to replicate the model. Within 2 years, the Ethan and Tyler Foundation became a national reference for autistic childcare. Jasmine was invited to advise on public policies and participate in scientific committees. But the most special moment happened when Ethan turned 10. Jonathan organized a party at the foundation, inviting all the families they served. During the party, Ethan asked to speak into the microphone. "I want to thank Jasmine for teaching me that being different isn't a bad thing. It's just different," he said with impressive maturity for his age. "Now I help other kids understand that too." Jasmine couldn't hold back her tears. 3 years ago, she was a waitress who was looked down on and humiliated. Today, she ran a foundation that changed lives and was nationally recognized for her competence. "Ethan, you know something?" she said, picking up the microphone. "You taught me as much as I taught you. You taught me that difference is a gift, not a problem." Jonathan, watching the scene, remembered the first day he saw Jasmine calming Ethan at the restaurant. He never would have imagined that encounter would transform not only his son's life, but the lives of hundreds of other children and families. That night, after everyone had left, Jonathan, Jasmine, and Ethan were organizing the toys when Ethan asked a question that took them both by surprise. "Jasmine, can you be my second mum?" Jasmine was at a loss for words. She looked at Jonathan, who smiled and nodded. "Ethan, I've felt like your second mum for a long time," she said, hugging him, "and you and your dad are already my chosen family." "Then we're a special family," said Ethan, including Jonathan in the hug. "A family that helps other families." And that's exactly what they had become. A special family that found in difference the strength to turn prejudice into love, despair into hope, and exclusion into acceptance. The Ethan and Tyler Foundation continued to grow, but always kept the values Jasmine learned in the community where she grew up, that every child deserves love, respect, and opportunity, regardless of their background, color, or condition. Ethan grew up to become a confident and empathetic young man, always willing to help other children. Tyler developed an extraordinary talent for music and became the official pianist for the Foundation's events. And Jasmine, the waitress who was once looked down on for trying to help a child in crisis, became one of the country's leading experts on autism, proving that competence, love, and dedication are far more important than last names, diplomas, or bank accounts. End of story. Tell us what you thought of this inspiring story of overcoming adversity. Do you know someone who works with special needs children? Leave a comment sharing your experiences, and don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that show how love and understanding can transform lives.